They say silence is golden. I suppose that's true, if you're in a library or a monastery, but when that silence is coming from the one person you poured your entire life into, it's not golden. It's the color of rust. It's the slow, creeping corrosion of the soul. My name is Roger. I'm 73 years old, and for the last 382 days, I have been a ghost in my own family. And like any good ghost, my job, it seems, is to haunt. It all started, as these things often do, with a move. My daughter Sarah, her husband Mark, and my two beautiful grandchildren, Chloe and Leo, decided to leave the hustle and bustle of the city behind. They were moving clear across the country to a small idyllic town called Heavenwood. It sounded like something out of a storybook, a place with a town square, a community newsletter, and neighbors who supposedly still bake pies for newcomers. They sold me on the dream. "It's for the kids, Dad," Sarah had said, her eyes shining with earnest conviction. A better life, safer schools, a real community. I bought it. I didn't just buy the story. I funded it. I'm a retired civil engineer. I did well for myself, and after my dear wife Martha passed on, I made it my singular mission to ensure Sarah and her family never had to worry. I sold my majority stake in the firm I built from the ground up and created a substantial trust. It wasn't just a rainy day fund, it was a deluge fund. It paid for the down payment on their new sprawling home in Heavenwood. It paid for the moving vans. It provided them with a generous monthly stipend that meant Mark's perfectly adequate salary as a project manager could be supplemented to give them a life of genuine comfort. I was the silent, benevolent benefactor, the bedrock on which they built their perfect new life, and for a little while, the dream held. The first month was a flurry of FaceTime calls. Chloe showing me her new bedroom, Leo demonstrating how high he could swing on the new backyard swing set I'd paid for. They promised visits. "We'll fly you out for Thanksgiving, Dad. You'll love it here." The promises were as bright and shiny as their new stainless steel appliances. But then the shine began to dull. The weekly calls became bi-weekly, then monthly. Then they became rushed, distracted affairs. "Sorry, Dad. Gotta run. We're hosting a potluck for our church group." Or "Mark's boss is coming over. Can I call you back next week?" The call back never came. Emails I sent with pictures of my garden, or an article I thought Mark might find interesting, went unanswered. It was a slow fade, a gradual turning down of the volume of my existence, until there was nothing but static. The holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving came and went with a 2-minute call, as they were walking out the door to a Friendsgiving celebration. I ate my turkey dinner from the deli counter alone, the silence in my house so profound I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Christmas was a text message, a single solitary text message on Christmas morning. "Merry Xmas, Dad. Kids love the gifts. Super busy today. We'll call soon." They didn't. Instead, I saw the pictures on social media later that night. A full family portrait in matching pajamas in front of a roaring fire. Sarah, Mark, Chloe, Leo. A perfect complete set. There was no room for a ghost at that fireplace. I tried to tell myself it was my fault. I was being too sensitive. They were busy building a new life. I was an old man, set in my ways, a relic from a life they'd chosen to leave behind. That's the thing about emotional neglect. Its first victim is your own sense of reality. You start to believe their narrative. You start to think the problem is you. The final straw, the one that broke the back of my quiet, accommodating patience, was my 73rd birthday. It was a Tuesday. I didn't expect a party. I didn't expect a parade. But I expected a call. It's a simple thing. A phone call. A 5-minute connection to acknowledge the day I came into this world. I left my phone on the kitchen counter all day, the ringer on loud. I checked it every half hour, just in case I'd missed it. The screen remained dark. The silence remained absolute. By 9 o'clock that night, a cold, hard knot had formed in my stomach, the kind of knot that isn't from hunger or illness, but from the stark, brutal realization of being utterly forgotten. Just before bed, I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't. I opened my laptop and went to Sarah's social media page, and there it was, a new post. From just an hour earlier, a dozen professional-looking photos of a huge backyard barbecue, banners, balloons, a crowd of smiling, happy people. The caption read, "So incredibly blessed to host this year's Havenwood Church Welcome Committee fundraiser. It's moments like these, surrounded by faith, fellowship, and family, that make our hearts so full. Thank you to everyone who came out to support such a wonderful cause. Family." She used the word family. I scanned the pictures, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. There was Mark, flipping burgers, wearing an apron that said Grill Sergeant. There was Sarah, glass of wine in hand, laughing with a woman who looked to be about her age. There were Chloe and Leo, running through a sprinkler with a pack of other children, their new family, their real family. Underneath, the comments were a river of praise. "You and Mark are pillars of this community," one said. "Such a beautiful family, inside and out," said another. The very picture of compassion. Compassion. The word hit me like a physical blow. They could muster up compassion for an entire committee of relative strangers, but not a 5-minute phone call for the man who gave them everything. The man who was, at that very moment, sitting alone in the dark, staring at a picture of their perfect life, a life from which he had been so completely and efficiently erased. And in that moment, the ghost decided it was time to start rattling his chains. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about a correction, a factual, documented, undeniable correction. I stood up, walked over to my desk, and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, type of contact. Column C, outcome. My haunting was about to begin. The days that followed my 73rd birthday were a blur of quiet fury and meticulous organization. The grief was still there, a dull, heavy ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with something else, a cold, clear sense of purpose. The fog of self-doubt had burned away, leaving behind the sharp, crystalline structure of the truth. I wasn't a forgettable old man. I was a discarded utility. I had served my purpose, and now I was expected to sit quietly in a drawer until I expired. I called my oldest and dearest friend Frank. We'd served in the Navy together, two young men seeing the world from the deck of a destroyer. We'd seen each other through marriages, births, and the loss of our wives. Frank was a retired Master Chief Petty Officer, a man whose worldview was forged in boiler rooms and naval discipline. He didn't deal in platitudes. He dealt in engine specs and direct orders. He was the only person I knew who could handle the raw, unvarnished version of my story. He picked up on the second ring. "Roger, you sound like hell. Happy belated birthday to me, Frank," I said, the words tasting like ash. I told him everything. I didn't hold back. I told him about the slow fade, the missed holidays, the perfect curated life they displayed online like a prize-winning pumpkin at a county fair. I told him about the trust fund, the house, the monthly stipend, and I told him about my birthday, about the church fundraiser, about the word compassion. I talked for nearly an hour, pacing my small study, my voice growing hoarse. When I finished, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Finally Frank spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Roger, I'm going to say this as your friend. You're a damn fool, but you're a fool with a good heart, which is the most dangerous kind." "I know," I whispered. I kept making excuses for them." "Of course you did," he grunted. "You love your daughter, you see Martha in her eyes, but you need to open your own eyes, buddy. This isn't just them being busy. This is a strategy. They moved across the country, put you on an ice floe, and are just waiting for you to drift away. They're cashing your checks and erasing your name from the ledger. They've abandoned their post. In my Navy, that's called desertion." Desertion. The word hung in the air between us. It was a military term, stark and unforgiving, and it was perfect. "What am I supposed to do, Frank?" I asked, the question feeling impossibly heavy. "Storm out there, yell at them, beg for their attention? Hell no." he shot back. You don't beg for respect from your own damn kid. You command it, or, if they won't give it, you make them understand the consequences of withholding it. What did that lawyer of yours, Arthur, put in that trust document? That question was the spark. After I hung up with Frank, I went to the heavy fireproof safe in my closet, the one where I kept my service medals, Martha's jewelry, and the important documents of my life. I pulled out the thick-bound portfolio for the Sarah Langston Family Trust. I hadn't looked at it in years. I'd set it up, funded it, and let it run, a silent engine powering their lives, from 2,000 miles away. My memories flooded back, as I sat in my worn leather armchair, the one Martha always said made me look professorial. I remembered Sarah as a little girl, all pigtails and skinned knees, how she'd climb into this very chair with me, and listen to me read stories about explorers and engineers. After Martha got sick, it was just the two of us. I was a single father long before it was common. I packed her lunches. I went to her parent-teacher conferences. I taught her how to ride a bike. And I held her when her first boyfriend broke her heart. On Martha's last day, she'd grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Promise me, Roger," she'd whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "Promise me, you'll always look out for our girl." I'd promised, and for 30 years, I'd kept that promise. It was the reason I'd tolerated so much. I saw every ignored call, every flimsy excuse, as a small price to pay to keep that promise. I was looking out for her, providing for her, even if she didn't seem to need or want the me part of the equation anymore. I was honoring my wife. But as I sat there, the cold weight of the trust document in my lap, Frank's word echoed in my mind. Desertion. Had Sarah deserted me? Or had I, in my blind adherence to an old promise, enabled her to do it? Was I honoring Martha? Or was I letting her memory be used as a justification for my own erasure? I flipped through the pages, the dense legalese blurring my vision. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was an engineer. I knew how to read a blueprint. And this document was the blueprint of their financial lives. I found the section on distributions. There it was, the monthly stipend, ironclad. It would go to them every month like clockwork. But then there was another section. Section 4B, discretionary distributions. This covered lump sum payments for things deemed conducive to the well-being and advancement of the beneficiaries. Things like home renovations, new vehicles, private school tuition, business investments. It was the fund that paid for their lifestyle upgrades, for the veneer of effortless affluence. And then I saw the clause, a single sentence I'd barely registered, when my lawyer Arthur had suggested it all those years ago. All discretionary distributions are subject to the trustee's assessment that the primary beneficiary, Sarah Langston, is maintaining a good faith familial relationship with the grantor. A good faith familial relationship. Arthur had called it a moral turpitude clause. But for families, he'd said, it's just a backstop, Roger. A little bit of insurance to make sure no one takes the money and runs. Emotionally speaking, I had laughed at the time. My Sarah? Never. I read the clause again, and again. The engineer in me saw not just a sentence, but a load-bearing wall. A structural component they had assumed was purely decorative. They had broken the covenant, and my promise to Martha. It wasn't just about providing money. It was about looking out for our girl. And what kind of father would I be if I let my daughter become someone who could so callously discard her own parent? What kind of grandfather would I be if I let my grandchildren learn that this was an acceptable way to treat family? Maybe, just maybe, truly looking out for her meant introducing her to the one thing she and Mark had never had to face, a consequence. The plan began to form, not as a hot-blooded quest for revenge, but as a cool, calculated engineering problem. The objective, to re-establish the terms of the relationship. The variable, their perception of reality. The tool, the truth. I spent the next 2 weeks in my study, which Frank now called my war room. The spreadsheet grew. Every unreturned call I'd ever logged in my old journals, every ignored email I could find in my sent folder, every holiday I'd spent alone. I cross-referenced them with Sarah's social media. The juxtaposition was sickeningly powerful. December 25th. Email sent. Merry Christmas, my dears. Status, unread. Social media post, best Christmas ever with my perfect family. Blessed April 12th, Chloe's birthday, called at 9 a.m., 2 p.m., 7 p.m. All went to voicemail. Social media post, can't believe my baby is 12. Threw her the most amazing unicorn party with all her new besties. July 4th, text sent, Happy Independence Day. No reply. Social media post, incredible fireworks display with our Havenwood friends. So glad to be part of a real community. It was a timeline of my own disappearance. Factual. Undeniable. Chilling. I called Frank again. I've got the data, I told him. Now I need the delivery system. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm not suing them. I'm not cutting them off completely. The trust won't let me do that with the stipend anyway. I need something more elegant. You want to hit them where they live, Frank said, understanding immediately. Not in their house, in their reputation. He was the one who found it. The Havenwood Community Chronicle. It was an online newsletter, updated weekly. It was quaint, almost amateurish. It had sections for local sports, a calendar of events, a pastor's corner, and a classified section. And most importantly, it had a letters to the editors page. It was the digital town square for their perfect little storybook life. This is it, Roger, Frank said, his voice crackling with excitement over the phone. This is the main street. You post a letter here, and everyone from the mayor to the mailman will read it before lunch. These small towns, they thrive on gossip and reputation. It's their currency. The idea landed with the force of a revelation. It was perfect, public, but not global. Devastating, but not destructive in a way a court would recognize. It was a social bomb, and I had the blueprints to build it. I started writing. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it in sorrow. I adopted the tone of a confused, heartbroken old father who just wanted to understand. I kept it polite. I kept it factual. I used their own words, their own posts, as the framework. I wrote about my pride in their new life, my joy at seeing their happiness in the photos they shared. And then I laid out the timeline, not as an accusation, but as a puzzle I couldn't solve. I see the wonderful photos of my daughter Sarah and her husband Mark hosting church fundraisers, and my heart swells with pride at their compassion. I wrote, which is why I am so gently perplexed. Perhaps a reader could help me understand. On my 73rd birthday last month, the very day they hosted a grand and charitable party, I waited for a call that never came. On Christmas, a day for family, my email wishing them joy went unread, while their online post celebrated their perfect family. I have a year of these small quiet puzzles, a year of phone calls that rang into silence, of emails that vanished into the ether. I ended the letter with a simple, guileless question. I am only an old man, and perhaps I am out of touch with the way families communicate now. I just wanted to ensure their new friends in their wonderful new town had a complete picture of the family values they so beautifully represent. Perhaps I am simply a chapter they have closed. I only wish they had told me. I read it to Frank. When I was done, he was quiet for a long moment. Holy hell, Roger, he finally said. That's not a letter, that's a torpedo. A polite, gentlemanly torpedo, but a torpedo all the same. Are you sure you want to press the button? I looked at the picture of Martha on my desk. Her smile was warm, her eyes full of love. I had promised to look out for our girl, and sometimes looking out for someone means you have to stop a ship that's sailing full speed in the wrong direction, even if it means firing a shot across the bow. Yes, Frank, I said, my voice steady for the first time in a year. I am. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. It was about restoring a fundamental law of emotional physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. They had created a vacuum. I was about to fill it. The plan had 2 phases, synchronized like a military operation. Phase 1 was the torpedo, the letter to the editor of the Havenwood Community Chronicle. I sent it via email on a Tuesday night, knowing the newsletter was published every Thursday morning. Phase 2 was the broadside, a formal letter from my lawyer, Arthur. I had met with him the week before, laying out my documentation. Arthur, a man who wore tweed jackets but possessed the soul of a barracuda, had read the good faith familial relationship clause, with a slow predatory smile. "This is beautiful, Roger," he'd purred. "It's airtight. Their entire lifestyle, beyond the bare necessities, is predicated on the simple act of being decent to you. And they've failed, spectacularly." The letter he drafted was a masterpiece of cold legal precision. It informed Sarah and Mark that, effective immediately, my role as trustee required me to suspend all discretionary distributions from the family trust. It cited the specific clause, and stated that a review of the past year's communication, or lack thereof, indicated that the conditions of the clause were not being met. It confirmed that the base monthly stipend would continue as per the trust's mandate, but any and all requests for additional funds, including a pending 5-figure request for a kitchen and patio extension, were summarily denied. Arthur sent that letter via registered mail, timed to arrive on the same Thursday the newsletter went live. One shot to the reputation, one shot to the wallet, a coordinated strike. Then all I had to do was wait. It was the longest 36 hours of my life. I busied myself in the garden, pulling weeds with a vengeance. I tried reading, but I couldn't focus on the words. My house, usually a sanctuary of peaceful quiet, felt like the dead calm before a hurricane. Frank called on Wednesday night. "Are you ready for landfall?" he asked. "I've battened down the hatches," I told him, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Thursday morning, I was up at dawn. I made my coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. Frank had found a link to the Chronicle's online portal. At 7 a.m. sharp, the new edition appeared. I clicked on the letters to the editor's section, and there it was, at the very top of the page. The editor had even given it a title, "A Father's Heartbreak in Havenwood." My own words stared back at me from the screen. In the plain, simple font of the newsletter, they seemed even more potent, more starkly factual. I felt a tremor of fear, a sudden lurch of "what have I done?" But it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I had done what was necessary. The truth, after being suppressed for so long, was finally out in the open air. The first call came at 9:17 a.m. The caller ID showed Mark's cell phone. I let it ring 4 times, then picked up and said nothing. "Roger?" Mark's voice was tight, strained. He was trying to sound controlled, but I could hear the panic sizzling underneath. "I think you and I need to have a talk." "Hello, Mark," I said calmly. "I imagine we do." "What the hell is this?" he exploded, the veneer of control cracking instantly. This letter. In the Chronicle. Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I believe I've written a letter, Mark," I replied, my voice even. "It asks a few questions. I was hoping someone might have an answer." "An answer? You've made us a laughingstock. Sarah's phone is blowing up. People from church, from the kids' school, they're all asking about this heartbreak. You've humiliated us." "Humiliation is an interesting word," I said, swirling the coffee in my mug. "I would have chosen a different one. For instance, the feeling of sitting by a silent phone on your birthday. I might have called that humiliation. Or perhaps the feeling of being erased from your own family's narrative. That has a certain humiliating quality to it, don't you think?" There was a sputtering on the other end of the line. He was a project manager. He was used to managing timelines and budgets, not unquantifiable things like shame. He was completely out of his depth. "This is about money, isn't it?" he spat. "You're trying to blackmail us." "No, Mark, the money is a separate issue. Although on that topic, I assume you've received the letter from my attorney." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any explosion. It was the sound of a man realizing he was fighting a war on 2 fronts, and he'd just lost a major battle on both. "The trust," he stammered. "You can't do that. That's our money." "Actually, it isn't," I corrected him gently. "It's my money, held in a trust for your benefit, under certain conditions. Conditions which, as I'm sure Arthur's letter explained, have not been met." "Did you really think you could treat the source of your good fortune with utter contempt, and still expect the tap to stay on?" He started yelling then, a torrent of accusations and threats. I was senile. I was spiteful. He was going to get a lawyer. He was going to have me declared incompetent, removed as trustee. I let him vent. When he finally wound down, breathless and furious, I spoke again, my voice still quiet. You do that, Mark. You get your lawyer, and in the discovery process, my lawyer will be forced to present the spreadsheet I've compiled, a detailed, dated log of every ignored call, every unanswered email, every empty holiday, right next to the corresponding social media posts showcasing your perfect, compassionate life. I wonder how that will look in a court filing. I wonder if the Havenwood Community Chronicle would be interested in that as a follow-up story. Checkmate. He knew it. I knew it. He hung up without another word. An hour later, Sarah called. She was crying. It was the tactic I'd expected, the one she'd used since she was a little girl to get her way. It was always harder to resist. Dad, she sobbed. How could you do this to me? To your own daughter, to Chloe and Leo. Hello, Sarah, I said, my heart aching despite my resolve. Our friends, they're looking at us like we're monsters, she cried. The pastor's wife was supposed to have coffee with me this morning, and she canceled. She said she needed to pray on the situation. Dad, you've ruined everything. I haven't ruined anything, Sarah. I simply told the truth. A very small, very polite part of the truth. But why would you do it publicly? Why wouldn't you just talk to me? The question was so breathtaking in its lack of self-awareness that I almost laughed. Talk to you, I repeated. Sarah, my dear, I have been trying to talk to you for a year. I have left voicemails. I have sent emails. I have sent text messages. I have sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. The communication channel, as they say, has been exclusively one way. You only seem to want to talk now that your public image and your line of credit are at risk. She started to protest, to offer the same tired excuses about being busy, about the kids, about the church, but there was no conviction in it. The excuses sounded hollow even to her. Sarah, I said, cutting through the noise, let me ask you a simple question. The day the letter mentions my birthday, did you think of me, for even 1 minute? The line went dead silent. There was no sob, no excuse, no anger, just the vast, empty space of a truth she couldn't deny. In that silence, I had my answer, and in that silence, she finally understood that the rules of the game had changed forever. The ghost was no longer invisible. He was sitting at the head of the table. The days following, what Frank morbidly but accurately called the purge, were a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. The power shift was palpable. It was a tangible thing I could feel across the 2,000 miles that separated us. It was in the tone of their frantic, failed calls. It was in the digital silence that fell over Sarah's once vibrant social media feed. The stream of perfectly lit joy-filled photos, celebrating their wholesome life in Havenwood, dried up completely. Frank, my ever-loyal intelligence officer, took great pleasure in monitoring the situation for me. He'd call with updates, like a battlefield commander, reporting on enemy movements. The comments section on her last post is a minefield. Roger, he said one evening, chuckling. The fawning praise is gone. It's been replaced by a lot of passive-aggressive praying emojis and comments like, thinking of your whole family during this difficult time. That's small town, for we all read the letter, and we are judging you so hard right now. Apparently, the story had taken on a life of its own in Havenwood. My letter, with its gentle, sorrowful tone, had painted me as a heartbroken, forgotten father. It was a narrative that was impossible to fight without looking like a monster. According to Frank's online reconnaissance, Sarah and Mark had made a critical error in their counter-strategy. They'd tried to play the victim. Sarah had posted a vague saccharine message a few days after the newsletter came out. It was all about the complexities of family, the pain of private misunderstandings being aired publicly, and the importance of grace and forgiveness. She'd tried to subtly imply that I was a confused, perhaps vindictive, old man. It had backfired spectacularly. They're calling her out on it, Frank reported, barely containing his glee. One woman, a Brenda S., who seems to be the alpha mom of the church group, commented, "Grace and forgiveness are beautiful things, Sarah, but they usually start with an apology." Ouch. That one had to sting. They were trapped. To deny my claims would be to call me a liar, which, given my documented evidence, was a losing battle. To admit my claims were true would be to confirm that their entire public persona was a sham. Their only option was silence, and in the court of small-town public opinion, silence was an admission of guilt. The community they had worked so hard to impress, the one they had used as an excuse to abandon me, was now quietly, politely, exiling them. The invitations to potlucks stopped. The cozy coffee dates evaporated. They were surrounded by people, yet utterly alone. It was a perfect ironic reflection of the very isolation they had imposed on me. Then came their next move, the legal threat. I got a call from Arthur. "Roger, I just had a fascinating conversation with a Mr. Mark Langston," Arthur said, his voice dripping with amusement. He was quite agitated. He informed me in no uncertain terms that he and his wife would be seeking legal counsel to have you removed as trustee on the grounds of emotional instability and malicious intent. My heart seized for a moment. "Can they do that?" Arthur let out a dry chuckle. "They can certainly try. It would be an incredibly expensive and humiliating fishing expedition for them." I informed Mr. Langston that any such legal action would open them up to a discovery process. I explained that we would be legally obligated to submit your spreadsheet, which, by the way, is a work of art, as evidence of your sound and reasoned judgment. I painted a vivid picture of their social media posts being read aloud in a deposition. The line went very quiet after that. I don't think we'll be hearing from their legal counsel anytime soon. It was a relief, but the victory felt hollow. This was my family. This was the ugly, brutal machinery of what we had become. Their final, most desperate gambit came a week later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. My phone rang, and it was Sarah's number. I braced myself for another round of tears or threats. I was wrong. "Grandpa," a small voice said. It was Chloe, my granddaughter, my brilliant, funny, 12-year-old Chloe. My heart simply broke. "Chloe, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's so good to hear your voice." "Grandpa, why are you being so mean to Mommy and Daddy?" she asked. Her voice was trembling slightly, and I could hear the telltale echo of a coached speech. It was a performance. This was their nuclear option, using my own grandchild as a human shield. It was a new low, even for them. I could hear a faint whispering in the background. A male voice. Mark. He was feeding her lines. The rage that surged through me was white hot, but I couldn't direct it at her. She was a pawn, another victim of their selfish machinations. I took a deep, steadying breath, forcing the anger down. "Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry if it seems that way," I said, my voice as gentle as I could make it. "I would never ever want to be mean to your parents or to you. I love you more than words can say." I paused, choosing my next words with surgical care. "Did you know that I've been trying to talk to you for a whole year? I've sent you emails for your birthday, for the holidays, just to say hello. I think I sent 37 of them. Your mom has them in her email account. Maybe you could ask her to show them to you. They have pictures of my dog, Gus, and my new tomato plants. I think you'd like them." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Chloe's. It was the sound of a child realizing she had been lied to. In the background I heard Mark's angry hiss. "Just hang up the phone, Chloe." "Hang up. I have to go, Grandpa," she whispered, her voice tiny. "I know, sweetheart," I said. "I love you." The line clicked dead, but I had planted a seed of truth. I had given her a key to a door they had tried to lock forever. It was a cruel thing they had done, making her fight their battle. But in their desperation, they had made another miscalculation. They had accidentally reopened a line of communication they had spent a year trying to sever, and they had armed their own daughter with a question they would not be able to answer. The power hadn't just shifted, it had started an avalanche. 2 weeks after the phone call with Chloe, my doorbell rang. It was a Saturday morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. Standing on my front porch was a rental car with out-of-state plates, and standing next to it, looking tired and grim, were Sarah and Mark. They had driven 2,000 miles. The journey had clearly taken its toll. The glossy, curated sheen they projected on social media had been completely stripped away. Sarah's eyes were puffy, and she was wearing sweatpants. Mark's face was pale, his shoulders slumped in his wrinkled polo shirt. They didn't look like the pillars of the Havenwood community. They looked like refugees. I opened the door. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We just stood there, separated by the threshold, a physical representation of the massive gulf between us. "Dad," Sarah said finally, her voice raspy, Can we come in?" I stepped back and held the door open. They walked into the living room, the room that held so many ghosts of our shared past. They looked around, as if seeing it for the first time. It was the same room where she'd opened her Christmas presents as a child, the same room where we'd held a small reception after Martha's funeral. Now, it was a courtroom. They sat on the sofa, the one I rarely used. I took my usual spot in my leather armchair, the trust document still on the end table beside me like a silent witness. The air was thick with unspoken things. Sarah began, predictably, with a weak rambling apology. It was full of phrases like, "We let things get away from us, and it was never our intention to hurt you." It was a corporate apology, designed to smooth things over without admitting any real fault. I listened patiently, my hands steepled in front of me, saying nothing. Mark, ever the project manager, quickly grew impatient with the preamble. He cut her off. "Look, Roger," he said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, "we're in a real bind here. We put a deposit down on the kitchen extension, a non-refundable deposit. We used a credit card, assuming the next distribution was coming. If we can't pay the contractor in 2 weeks, we lose the deposit, and we're on the hook for the full amount. We need you to release the funds." And there it was, the raw, unvarnished truth. They hadn't driven across the country to repair a fractured relationship. They had come to secure a line of credit. They hadn't come to see their father. They had come to see their banker. I let the silence hang in the air for a full minute. I looked from Mark's desperate face to Sarah's anxious one. I saw no remorse in her eyes, only fear, the fear of financial ruin, of social downgrade. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the center of the room like a granite block. "What?" Mark stammered. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean the answer is no," I repeated, my voice calm and steady. "The discretionary funds are frozen. That is not a negotiating position. It is the new reality." "You can't do that," Sarah cried, her voice rising. "That's our money. It's our inheritance." "It is not your inheritance," I stated, my patience finally wearing thin. "An inheritance is what you get when I'm dead. This is a gift, and a gift with conditions. Conditions you have failed to meet on every conceivable level." I stood up and walked over to the mantelpiece, my back to them. I picked up the framed photo of Martha. "I made a promise to your mother," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I promised I would always look out for you, and for years I thought that meant giving you everything you wanted, a safety net made of money. I see now that I was wrong. I wasn't looking out for you. I was enabling you. I was bankrolling the creation of a daughter who thought her own father was disposable, a daughter who would teach her own children that love and respect are optional, but a comfortable lifestyle is a right." Martha would be ashamed, not of me, of what you've become. Sarah started to sob, real tears this time, tears of self-pity. I turned back to face them. My own eyes were dry. The time for my tears was long past. It was never about the money for me, Sarah. It was about the phone call. It was about the simple human acknowledgement that I exist, that I matter to you. But you've made it about the money. So let's talk about the money. I laid out the new terms of our relationship, the terms they had created. The monthly stipend will continue. That is for the grandchildren, for their food and clothing and basic needs. But the discretionary fund, the one that pays for kitchen extensions and new cars and your curated lifestyle, is closed indefinitely. I am meeting with Arthur next week to restructure things. I am setting up 2 new irrevocable custodial accounts, one for Chloe and one for Leo. The discretionary funds will be transferred into those accounts to be managed by a third-party bank, and they will not be accessible to anyone, not you, not me, until each child turns 25. That is their inheritance, safe from your influence and your poor choices. They stared at me, their faces a mask of disbelief. What are we supposed to do? Mark whispered, the fight completely gone from him. My salary. It can't cover the mortgage and the car payments on its own. Not for that house. I gave a small sad shrug. I imagine you'll have to do what most people do, Mark. You'll live within your means. You might have to sell the big impressive house in Havenwood. You might have to cancel your country club membership. You might have to learn the difference between what you want and what you need. It will be a difficult lesson, I'm sure, but it's one you should have learned a long time ago. They left less than an hour later. There were no more tears, no more threats, just a profound defeated silence. As they walked out the door, Sarah turned to me one last time, her face a hollow shell. I never thought you'd do it, she said. I never thought you had it in you. Neither did I said, and closed the door. The click of the latch was the sound of my own liberation. The vindication wasn't joyful. It was a quiet, somber thing, but it was real. The power hadn't just shifted. The entire board had been reset, and for the first time in a very long time, I was playing by my own rules. It's been 6 months since that day. The silence from Sarah and Mark has returned, but it's a different kind of silence now. It's not the silence of neglect. It's the silence of irrelevance. They no longer hold any power over my emotional state. My well-being is no longer contingent on their approval or attention. My house is still quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet, not a lonely one. It's the quiet of a man who is at home with himself. Frank and I have a standing breakfast date every Friday. We talk about old Navy days, about our gardens, about the state of the world. He's my family now, in all the ways that count. Family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up. Frank always shows up. A few weeks ago I got an email. The sender's address was one I didn't recognize, from a school district server. The subject line just said, "Hi Grandpa." It was from Chloe. "Hi Grandpa." It read, "Mom was really mad you told me about the emails, but I got on her computer when she was out, and I searched your name. I found them, all of them. I read every one. I love the picture of Gus with the floppy hat. I'm sorry we didn't call on your birthday. Mom and Dad were fighting a lot. I miss you. Love, Chloe." I had to get up from my desk and walk around the room for a few minutes after I read that. It wasn't an apology from Sarah. It wasn't a capitulation from Mark. It was something far more valuable. It was a single fragile sprout of truth, growing in a poisoned field. It was a connection, real and uncoached. I wrote back to her, and we've been emailing back and forth ever since. I send her pictures of my life, and she sends me pictures of hers. It's a small thing, but it's everything. Frank snooping tells me that Sarah and Mark did, in fact, sell the big house in Havenwood. They bought a smaller townhouse on the other side of the county. The social media posts are gone. Mark, I hear, took on a weekend job. They are living within their means. Consequences are a powerful teacher. Now I know some of you listening to my story might think I went too far, that a family squabble should have been kept private, that publishing that letter was a cruel and unforgivable act. Maybe you're right. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. Was it about revenge? In the end, I don't think so. It was about truth. Their entire life was built on a lie. The lie of the perfect, wholesome, compassionate family, and that lie was funded by my money and my silence. I simply withdrew both. You can't force someone to love you. You can't make them respect you. But you do not have to subsidize their disrespect. You do not have to sit silently in the dark while they erase you from your own story. Respect is a two-way street, and when the traffic is only flowing in one direction, you have every right to close the road. I'm sure many of you have faced something similar, a time when you felt invisible to the very people who should see you most clearly, a time when your value was measured only by what you could provide. I'd be genuinely interested to read your own stories in the comments below. What would you have done in my shoes? Was my letter a justified correction, or a petty revenge? If this story of an old engineer finally rediscovering his own structural integrity resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and maybe subscribe for more stories about folks who decided, one day, that they'd simply had enough. Thank you for listening.